My wife cheated on me with her boss, and now he's claiming $250, $0 in settlement for emotional damages, but I just found out she's been secretly selling off our family property to fund her new life. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here writing all this down, but life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. You think you know someone, you trust them with everything, your money, your future, your heart, and then one day, it all comes crashing down in ways you never saw coming. It started subtly at first. Lisa, my wife, always seemed a little more stressed than usual, snapping at me over minor things, canceling plans at the last minute, and being way more secretive about her phone. I'd catch her deleting texts or rushing to hide her screen when I'd walk into the room. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but something felt off. Then came the day I decided to do a little digging. I've been noticing her spending more and more time on her laptop late at night. She'd stay up scrolling through social media, but her activity logs told a different story. I found hidden folders with names like confidential and for your eyes only. When I peeked inside, I saw messages from her boss, Mark, that were more than just professional chit-chat. They were flirty, suggestive, and downright inappropriate. What really tipped me off was the way she was acting. She'd get defensive if I asked about her meetings, and suddenly she was working late or going out with colleagues. But I knew better. I knew she'd been sneaking around. I confronted her that night and she spun some bullshit about how I was paranoid, that Mark was just a friend and I was overreacting, but I wasn't buying it. I saw the texts, the photos she'd taken of herself in her office, the late-night calls. The worst part, I caught her in a lie. I found her phone tucked away, and I decided to check her messages. What I saw was enough to make my blood boil. She'd been having sex with Mark, no doubt about it. She'd even sent lewd photos claiming she was tired of pretending with me. And the thing is, she's always been the kind of woman who acts like she's the victim, crying about how hard her life is, how I never listen, how she's just so misunderstood. But here she was, sneaking around, betraying everything we built and lying through her teeth. The moment I found out, everything changed. I felt this mix of shock, anger, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. I'd been blind, I guess. I thought we were solid, that we had a future. But she was out there selling off our family property to fund her new life, her own version of happiness, I suppose. I found bank statements showing withdrawals from our savings account, big chunks of money gone without explanation. She'd been secretly cashing out our assets, probably to cover her secret life. I remember sitting in my living room that night, staring at the pile of evidence I'd gathered. My hands were trembling, and I felt like I was going to throw up. I wanted to punch something, scream at her, but I also felt this deep, aching sadness. How could she do this? How could she lie and cheat and then try to pretend it was all a mistake? I felt betrayed, stupid for trusting her, and furious that she'd been so manipulative. I knew I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I called her out the next morning, and her reaction was classic Lisa. She lied, she gaslighted, she played the victim. She told me Mark was just a boss who took advantage of her, that she was confused, that she didn't mean for it to happen. She kept crying, saying I was overreacting, that I was paranoid, that I didn't understand her struggles, but I wasn't buying any of it. I saw her for what she was, a cheat, a liar, a user. And I knew then that my world was never going to be the same. That's where I am now, just trying to figure out what's next. Do I stay and fight for what's left, or do I cut my losses and walk away? The betrayal cut deep, but what's worse is knowing she's been secretly selling off our family property, our safety, our investments, to fund a new life, when she's been planning behind my back. I never thought I'd be this guy, but here I am, trying to piece my life back together after everything I thought was real turned out to be a lie. After I found the bank statements and seen the amount of money she'd been siphoning off, I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach all over again. Lisa had been quietly selling off chunks of our family property, our house, our land, even some investments we'd made years ago. She'd been doing it in secret, probably thinking I wouldn't notice or maybe hoping I'd never find out. But I did. It wasn't just the money. It was the fact that she'd been planning this entire betrayal for months, maybe longer. She'd been orchestrating her escape while I was clueless. I started digging deeper into our finances, and what I uncovered was shocking. She drained our savings account, cashed out our retirement funds, and even sold some of our property to some shady real estate agents she'd been talking to behind my back. I found out she'd been meeting with these agents during work hours, pretending to be reviewing properties for a potential investment. But it was clear she was already planning her new life, and I was just the last piece of the puzzle. She'd been lying about her job, lying about her whereabouts, and lying about her intentions. All the while, she was building a new life with Mark, her boss, who apparently was more than just a friend. He was her new partner, her new everything. The betrayal cut even deeper because she kept lying about everything. She'd tell me she was tired, stressed out from work, or that she needed space to think. But the truth was she was already gone in her mind, already living with Mark. I remember finding a secret email account she'd created where she'd been communicating with Mark directly. The messages were full of plans, promises, and flirtatious exchanges. She'd even sent him photos of herself, half naked, claiming she was doing this for us, as if it was some kind of twisted gift for him. When I confronted her with the evidence, her usual bitchy attitude kicked in. She said I was just paranoid, that I was blowing things out of proportion, that I was controlling. She called me jealous and possessive, as if I was the one doing wrong, but I knew better. I had proof. I could see her lies unraveling in real time, and the worst part, she still everything, even when I showed her the emails, the bank statements, the photos. She insisted she was just having a rough patch, that she loved me, that she was confused, and that Mark meant nothing. It was a classic case of her spinning the story, trying to turn the tables on me. She's always been good at that, a master manipulator. But I wasn't buying her bullshit anymore. I'd seen her true face, and it wasn't pretty. It was selfish, manipulative, and utterly unfaithful. I felt humiliated and angry, but also hurt that she'd betrayed me, lied to me, and used me to fund her escape plan. I started thinking about everything she'd stolen from us, not just money, but my trust, my sense of security, my pride. I had worked so hard to build a life with her, and now I was left picking up the pieces. I knew I needed to do something, but I wasn't sure what. I wanted to confront her publicly, tear her apart, make her face the consequences of her actions. But I also knew I had to be strategic. This wasn't just about yelling and blaming. This was about stopping her from taking any more of what was ours. The moment I realized she'd been secretly selling off our property, I knew I had to act fast. I contacted my lawyer, started looking into legal options, and even considered filing for divorce. But what really pushed me was the fact that she was trying to keep me in the dark about everything, pretending to be still committed while planning her new life with Mark. She'd been lying about her feelings, her intentions, and her loyalty. Honestly, I felt like I was living in a nightmare. I trusted Lisa more than anyone in this world, and she'd turned out to be nothing but a con artist. I kept asking myself how I'd missed the signs, how I'd been so blind. But there's no point dwelling on the past now. All I could do was focus on stopping her from stealing any more, protecting whatever was left, and figuring out how to move forward. I spent the next few days in a daze trying to piece everything together. I knew I had to tell my family, my friends, and start planning my next move. I was angry, hurt, and betrayed beyond words. But deep down, I also felt a strange sense of clarity. This was her choice, her mistake, and I wasn't going to let her ruin everything I'd worked for. I was going to fight for what was mine, even if it meant tearing everything apart to do it. After I got all the evidence and made the decision to act, things moved pretty fast. I hired a lawyer right away, a no-nonsense guy named Tom who specializes in family law and asset recovery. I knew I had to be strategic because Lisa was already trying to cover her tracks, and I didn't want her slipping away with everything she'd stolen. The first thing Tom told me was to freeze all our accounts, especially the ones she'd been draining. I didn't waste a second. I went to the bank, showed them the evidence, and they put a hold on all transactions. That was the moment I realized how deep her betrayal ran. She'd been transferring money to offshore accounts, probably planning to disappear completely. The thought of losing everything, including the family home, made my stomach turn. While the finances were being frozen, I started digging into her secret dealings with the real estate agents. I found out she'd been in contact with a shady broker named Rick, who specialized in quick sales of distressed properties. She'd been pushing him to sell parts of our land without my knowledge. I contacted him directly, and it was a shock. He confirmed she'd been pushing him to close deals ASAP, claiming she had urgent personal needs. That was a lie. She'd been planning her escape for months. I also discovered she'd sold off several pieces of our property at well below market value, pocketing the difference. I couldn't believe it. She'd been willing to destroy our financial future just to fund her new life with Mark. It made me furious because I'd always thought of her as someone who cared about our family, about stability. Turns out, she'd been secretly destroying it all for her own selfish reasons. The most shocking moment came when I found her emails to Mark. She'd been telling him how she was going to leave, how she was done with the old life, and how she was ready to start fresh, just the two of them. I'd never imagined she'd be so blatant about it. She even discussed plans to move out of state, change her name, and start over. It was like she'd already made her mind up and I was just an obstacle in her path. I remember sitting on the couch, staring at those emails for hours, my hands trembling, my mind racing. How could she do this to me, to us? I'd given her everything, my money, my trust, my love, and she'd been just using me as a stepping stone to her new life. I felt sick. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated. I started questioning everything. The years we spent together, the little things I missed, the signs I ignored. But I also knew I had to stay calm. I couldn't let her see me break. I decided I'd confront her face to face, but not before I got all my ducks in a row. I wanted her to see I was serious, that I was going to fight for what was ours. I arranged a meeting at her office where I could catch her off guard. I wanted her to know I'd uncovered everything, her lies, her cheating, her theft. When she arrived, she looked surprised, as if she hadn't expected me to come prepared. I laid everything out on the table: the bank freeze, the emails, the property deals. Her face turned white, then red with anger. She spat that I was crazy, that I was accusing her of things she didn't do, that I was jealous and paranoid. But I had the proof. It was all there. Her lies, her manipulations, her theft. She tried to deny everything, to pretend she was the victim, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I told her she had no right to take what wasn't hers, to ruin our family just because she was unhappy. I told her I was going to fight her in court, that I would recover what she'd stolen and hold her accountable. It was the first time I saw her truly panic. Her bitchy mask cracked just a little, and I saw the fear behind her eyes. That day marked a turning point. I knew I couldn't trust her anymore, and I was determined to make her face the consequences of her actions. I started putting together a legal case, gathering all the evidence and planning my next steps. Deep down, I knew this was going to get ugly. She was already trying to manipulate the situation, to spin her lies, to make me look like the bad guy. But I was done playing nice. I had to protect what was left of my life, and I was ready to fight for it, no matter what it took. Over the next few weeks, things escalated quickly. I was deep into legal battles, trying to get control of the assets she'd stolen or sold off. Meanwhile, Lisa kept up her act, acting like the innocent victim, crying about how everything was a misunderstanding, how she still loved me, and how she never meant for things to get this far. But I wasn't buying it anymore. Her tears didn't match the evidence I had. I hired a private investigator to track her movements. Turns out, she'd been staying at a hotel near her office, meeting with Mark almost every night. I found out she'd been planning to move out of the city entirely, maybe to some beach town she'd always talked about. Honestly, I was stunned at how far gone she was. She'd been planning her new life for months, maybe even a year, while pretending everything was fine at home. One day, I got a call from the pie. Lisa was at the airport, buying a ticket to Florida. I couldn't believe it. She was trying to run, trying to escape with whatever she could carry. That was the moment I realized I had to act fast. I called my lawyer and we filed an emergency court order to freeze her passport and prevent her from leaving the state. It was a tense few days, waiting to see if she'd try to slip away. In the meantime, I confronted her again, this time with a lot more anger. She was caught off guard, trying to spin her usual lies. I told her I knew everything about Mark, the property sales, the money she'd taken, her plans to run away. Her bitchy attitude turned to panic. She yelled, called me crazy, said I was possessive, and accused me of trying to control her. But I had the evidence, the emails, the bank records, the witness statements. I knew I was in the right. That confrontation was the first time I saw her truly lose her composure. She was furious, crying and screaming that she deserved better, that she was stuck in a dead-end marriage, and that Mark was her escape from all the stress. I told her she'd already destroyed everything, that she'd ruined our life, and that I was done playing her game. I told her I'd fight to get back what was ours, and I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything she'd taken. The court hearing to freeze her assets and prevent her from leaving was a nightmare. The judge was skeptical at first, but after reviewing the evidence, he granted the order. Lisa was furious, screaming that I was ruining her life, but I knew it was the only way to stop her from disappearing. I also filed for divorce, knowing I couldn't stay married to someone so deceitful. I never thought I'd have to do this, but I was done being a victim. As I watched her storm out of the courtroom, her face twisted with rage and frustration, I felt a strange mix of relief and heartbreak. I was finally taking control of the situation, but I also knew I'd lost something I could never get back: the trust, the love, the future we once shared. I kept thinking about all the money she'd stolen, the property she'd sold, and how she'd been lying to me every step of the way. The hardest part was realizing that the woman I'd loved, the woman I'd trusted with everything, was now just a stranger playing a game of deception. I kept asking myself how I missed the signs, how I let things get so out of control. But I also knew I couldn't change the past. All I could do now was focus on cleaning up the mess she'd left behind and figure out how to move forward. I spent nights lying awake, replaying everything in my head. The betrayal cut so deep, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I was angry at her, yes, but I was also determined. I'd fought for my right to protect what was mine, and I was going to keep fighting until I got some semblance of justice. This wasn't just about money or property anymore. It was about reclaiming my life from someone who had betrayed me in the worst way possible. The legal battles were just the beginning. Once the court froze her assets and stopped her from fleeing the state, Lisa's true colors started to show even more. She became increasingly desperate, trying every trick to manipulate the situation. She'd call me, plead for a chance to explain, cry about how she still loved me and how she'd changed. But I wasn't buying any of it. I knew her game. She'd been lying for so long, I could see through her tears and her false promises. One day she showed up at my house unannounced, knocking on the door with her typical bitchy smirk. She tried to guilt-trip me, saying I was ruining her life, that I was being unfair, and that she deserved a second chance. I told her to get lost. I told her I wasn't interested in her pity or her lies anymore. I'd given her enough chances, and now I was just fighting to get back what she'd stolen and to protect what was left of my sanity. She flipped her bitchy attitude into outright rage, screaming, shouting, calling me heartless, jealous, and possessive. She even accused me of trying to keep her prisoner, trying to make me look like the bad guy, but I knew the truth. I'd seen her emails, her bank transactions, her plans to run away. She was the one trying to escape, not me. I told her she needed to leave, that I was done with her manipulations. That day I finally stood my ground and she stormed off, cursing and threatening to sue me for harassment. The thing is, I was prepared for that. I had all the evidence in court. I had witnesses, bank statements, emails, everything I needed to prove she'd been lying, cheating, and stealing. I knew she'd try to spin her story, but I was ready. I filed a formal complaint for theft, fraud, and emotional damages. I wanted her held accountable for what she'd done, not just financially but emotionally. I wanted her to understand that you can't just lie and cheat your way out of consequences. Meanwhile, I started rebuilding my life. I moved out of the family home into a small apartment just so I could start fresh. I cut all contact with Lisa, except for what was absolutely necessary for legal proceedings. I also sought counseling, not because I was weak, but because I needed to process everything. The betrayal had shattered my trust in her, but I knew I had to stay strong for myself. I had to learn how to forgive not her, but myself for trusting her so blindly. I also began to realize how much her actions had affected me financially. I'd been so focused on the betrayal that I hadn't fully grasped how much she'd stolen, sold, or drained from our shared life. I'd lost our family home, our savings, and a future I'd worked so hard to build. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I reached out to financial advisors and started the process of recovering what I could. I filed claims against her for the stolen money, and I knew it wouldn't be easy. She was clever, manipulative, and desperate. But I was determined. The emotional toll was enormous. I'd gone from feeling like the luckiest guy in the world to feeling betrayed, humiliated, and angry. It was a one day I'd feel hopeful, thinking I'd get some justice. The next I'd be overwhelmed with despair. But I kept reminding myself that I was better off without her. I deserved someone who was loyal, honest, and respectful, not a lying cheat who sold off our future for her own selfish needs. Looking back now, I realize I've learned a lot from all this. Trust is fragile and it can be broken in a second. Never ignore the signs of trouble, no matter how much you love someone. And most importantly, you have to fight for yourself, your money, your dignity, your peace of mind. I know I can't undo what she did, but I can make sure she pays for her actions, legally and emotionally. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know one thing: I'm not the same person I was before her betrayal. I'm stronger now, more cautious, and more aware of how dangerous it can be too. Trust someone blindly. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone in my shoes, it's this: never let anyone take away your peace. Stand up, fight back, and don't ever let betrayal define your life. In the end, I managed to pull myself out of the chaos she left behind. It wasn't easy. I had to confront not just her lies and theft, but also my own feelings of betrayal and heartbreak. There were nights I wondered if I'd ever trust again, if I'd ever feel whole after everything she'd done. But slowly, I started to rebuild piece by piece. The legal process was exhausting, but it paid off. I was able to recover some of the stolen money through court orders and asset claims. The property she sold was reclaimed, or at least I fought to get a fair share of its value. It was a long, ugly fight, but I refused to let her walk away with everything. I wanted her to understand that betrayal has consequences, and that you can't just cheat and steal your way out of responsibility. What's more, I learned a hard lesson about trust. Never ignore the red flags, no matter how much you love someone. Never assume that things will get better without honest communication and transparency. Because when someone is dishonest and manipulative, it doesn't just hurt the person they're cheating on, it destroys everything. Now, I'm focused on my future. I've started dating again, cautiously, but with a new understanding of what I need and deserve. I've also become more aware of how important it is to protect myself financially and emotionally. The betrayal taught me that sometimes the biggest enemy is hiding right next to you, pretending to be your partner. Looking back, I realize I was naive. I trusted her too much and I paid the price. But I also know that I'm stronger for it. I learned to stand up for myself, to fight for what's right, and to never settle for someone who doesn't respect me. If I could give any advice to someone going through something similar, it would be this: trust is earned, not given blindly. Watch for the signs, protect your assets, and don't be afraid to fight for what's yours. The pain of betrayal is real, but it's also a catalyst for growth. You may lose a lot in the process, but you'll gain a better understanding of yourself and what you truly deserve. I'll never forget what happened, but I'll also never let it define me. Life goes on, and I'm finally learning how to move forward stronger, wiser, and more prepared for whatever comes next.